Oh, hello there. If you're one of my current subscribers, you'll probably notice that today's video is a little different, not to mention a little longer. I'll probably be taking the channel in the direction of game reviews, so I hope you enjoy. I must admit that Undertale holds a special place in my heart, so I might be a little bit more biased towards it than other games. This is because it came out at a crucial point in my childhood, and I remember watching Let's Plays of it all the time. I personally fell in love with the charm and personality of this video game, but I can understand if you've been put off from it because of the community that surrounds it.
What have I done?
But don't let that put you off completely. Give this game a chance and I'm sure you'll at least enjoy it. Undertale is a 2D retro-style game. It focuses on character and is jam-packed with personality. It's also pretty hilarious too. If you're a fan of games with multiple endings, then you're in luck, because this game has 93 individual endings. That's right, you heard me. 93 endings. All of the endings fall into one of three categories, those being pacifist, neutral, and genocide, most of which fall into the neutral category. While in combat, the game becomes a turn-based bullet hell style game, which means you'll have to do something really crazy and use both your brains and your eyes at the same time. This way you'll identify the patterns of the attacks and dodge appropriately, or just sit there and fail at being a gamer. And to do damage, you have to do a little timing minigame thing, and how good you do determines how much damage you do. And just like in most other games, any NPC that encounters you, you can just mindlessly kill and go on with your day, without giving it a second thought. But you can also choose to be a nicer person and not kill anything. While it's true that other games have runs where you don't have to kill any NPCs or anything like that, this game takes it a step further in the fact that you can interact and talk with each of the enemies and become friends with them, not just not kill them. Which means that if you don't want to kill anyone, you're going to have to figure out what they like or don't like so that they'll spare you and not want to kill you. For example, the NPC Snowdrake is trying to be a comedian, so unless you make a joke, he'll make a joke to you, and you'll have to laugh at it, and then he'll think you're not that bad and spare you. Or how Gift Rot was decorated by a bunch of teenagers, and you have to undecorate him to get him to like you. Just like a multitude of other games, you can heal yourself by eating food that you find, such as this abandoned quiche.
Tasty!
Alright, we've done it. We've made it to the point of no return, where we can no longer talk about this game without some major spoilers. So proceed at your own risk. We start off our journey by naming the fallen human. Trust me, that's important. We'll come back to that later. After the big fall in the opening cutscene, our character wakes up on a bed of golden flowers in a dark room. And the first thing to interact with us is one of these golden flowers. At first, it appears that Flowey is going to be the tutorial character, teaching us the ins and outs of the game. But we will be very, very wrong about that assumption. After offering to teach us about the world, the game initiates the first combat. This is what a battle screen looks like. And Flowey says to collect all the little friendliness pellets as they will help us along our way. But as it turns out, it was nothing but a trick, as those are actually his attacks, and he does a lot of damage to us. Although he's still teaching us about the world, As he puts it himself, it's kill or be killed. Luckily though, a friendly face saves us from the demonic flower and shows that not everyone in this game is going to be a complete enemy. This friendly face reveals that she is actually named Toriel, and that she's the caretaker of these ruins. Shortly after she saves us, we see the first little star thing, or our first save point. Then she proceeds to lead us through various puzzles and other things. After escorting us through several rooms, Toriel says that she has a very important task for us, that being to make it to the end of this room by ourselves. As we make it to the end of the room, it's revealed that she was hiding behind a pillar the whole time. She says it was an important test because she plans on leaving us for now, as she has business to attend to. And just before she leaves us for good, she gives us a cell phone. As soon as we leave the room, she immediately calls us on the cell phone to ask if we'd left the room that she left us in, and she does not want us to go because the place is a mess. We immediately ignore this advice. We then talk to a frog who tells us about acting so that we can spare people who don't want to fight, and then we find a bowl of candy and take just one candy, then continue on our journey. After a few minutes of exploring, she calls again to see our preference between butterscotch and cinnamon. Now would be a good time to say that this game is smart. I say that because she remembers my preference from the last time I played, that being butterscotch. Even if you plan on resetting, you have to be careful what you do in this game, as the game never forgets. While making progress through the ruins, we fail to this falling puzzle more times than we probably should, talk to a rock, and find some cheese stuck to a table. In the next room over from the stuck cheese is the game's first mini-boss, who is called Napstablook, who seems to be a ghost with depression. You have to beat him by cheering him on and improving their mood. And once you've improved his mood enough, he even does a little trick for you. Once the trick is over and you say you like it, the fight immediately ends. Napstablook then says that he even met someone nice today. That person is you. Once again in the next room over, we find a spider bake sale, where all proceeds go to real spiders. What do you know? After doing a very long perspective puzzle, we come across a toy knife. Don't worry, we don't plan to use it, only sell it later in the game. We finally make it to the end of the ruins. When we enter this room, Toriel finds that she has been away for far too long and tries to call us only to see us right in front of her. And then she says she has a surprise for us and brings us into her house. Then she says that she was baking a butterscotch cinnamon pie. Then she brings us to our own room.
Aww.
As she rushes off to check on the burning pie, we step into our room to take a look. We of course give the bed a try, and when we wake up there's a plate of freshly made butterscotch cinnamon pie sitting for us on the floor. Once we leave the room, we go and talk with Toriel. She says she's glad to have our company and reveals that she's always wanted to be a teacher. She even has a curriculum in mind for us already. But being the brat that we are, we ask to go home, which Toriel responds by trying to distract us with an interesting stale fact. But we press the issue, which makes Toriel upset. She says she must go and do something. We follow her downstairs, and Toriel says that she will destroy the exit to the ruins so that no one can ever leave them again. We continue to follow her, and she reveals that every human that has ever left the ruins has died, and that someone named Asgore has killed them all. She says she is protecting us and wants us to go to our room. Finally, with the exit in sight, she says that if we want to leave, then we must prove ourselves to be strong enough. This is the very first boss fight of the game. But don't worry, this fight actually isn't that tough, and once your health drops to a certain point, her attacks actually avoid you. This boss fight also serves as the final tutorial for the player. If you want to get past her without killing her, you have to figure out that the spare button also continues the fight rather than just ending it. After sparing for a while, she tells us to either fight or run away. After that, she begs us to go to our room one last time, saying that we could have a good life in the ruins even if we did not have much. Finally, she caves and says that she could not even save a single child, and that we would get bored in the ruins once we were used to them. Toriel tells us that if we truly wish to leave, then she will not stop us. We will not be allowed to come back. She walks back into her home, only turning back to look at us one last time. Then we finally venture out of the ruins and into the underground for the first time. Upon leaving the ruins, we once again encounter Flowey from the beginning of the game. This time, instead of attacking us, he calls us very clever for not killing anyone, then mocks us about the possibility of meeting a relentless killer. He even monologues about his evil plans. And now that we, the player, know that Flowey is not just some one-off character, we can tell something is up with him, as he is aware of our saves and how often we use them. For example, if you kill Toriel and then load back your save to spare her, he says this. After putting the whole Flowey thing behind us, for now, we step out into a snowy forest. Yep, totally nothing to see here in this forest.
He's just standing there, menacingly!
As it turns out, the scary dark figure in the forest was only Sans, the funny skeleton. Sans was actually on watch for humans, but thankfully he has no desire to actually capture us. He sees his brother coming, and we both cross the bridge. We, the player, end up hiding behind a very conveniently shaped lamp. His brother Papyrus comes onto screen and scolds Sans for being lazy and not recalibrating his traps after 8 whole days. And he also says that he must be the one to capture a human so that he can be a very famous royal guardsman. Seeing as how his brother wants to capture a human, Sans says that maybe this lamp can help him, to which Papyrus refuses, calling him a lazy bones. After being called a lazy bones, Sans uses this opportunity to make several skeleton puns, complete with a zoom-in sound effect and a ba-dum-ts. After this little sequence of events, Papyrus goes to tend to his own puzzles, and we come out from behind the lamp. When we talk to Sans after that, he says we should probably get going or we might have to sit through more of his hilarious jokes. But before we can leave, he stops us and says that his brother has been down recently, and that it would mean a lot to him if we would be captured by Papyrus, because he's not actually that dangerous, even if he tries to be. Also know what direction he goes. Some notable next steps in our adventure include finding a fishing pole with a phone number on it, finding a convenient box that we can store our stuff in, and encountering Snowdrake, the funny comedian guy. In the next room over, we encounter Sans and Papyrus again, and of course hijinks ensue. And Papyrus tells us that he will capture us and only to continue if we dare. Not long after, we encounter a very well-crafted sentry station. Gosh, I wonder who could have made this. The next enemy we encounter is a special one because they introduce the player to blue attacks. Blue attacks are simple to avoid once you understand them. To avoid them, you simply don't move while they're passing over you and they will do 0 damage. For first-time players in this fight, the dog will give dialogue that gives plenty of hints about the nature of the attack before he attacks you. Then he even says do not move an inch while the attack is playing out, giving the player plenty of information to piece the mechanic together. After that fight, Sans tells us to think about blue stop signs, we take a piece of a snowman to go on an adventure, and we come across Sans and Papyrus arguing about who they know. As it turns out, Sans and Papyrus made some puzzles to stop us, and this one is apparently an invisible electricity maze. However will we get by this one? Just how? It's impossible. The next time we encounter the brothers, they present us a puzzle that is so mind-bogglingly impossible that it is incomprehensible to mere mortals such as ourselves. That puzzle being the Junior Jumble. While walking through the snowy forest, we encounter a funny-looking dog that, when pet, begins to defy the laws of nature itself by expending its neck to lengths never before seen. After that awesome experience, we do a snow map puzzle and then encounter 2 more dogs, the number 2 Nose Nuzzle champions in 98. And these 2 dogs are one of the more challenging fights up to this point in the game. You have to roll around in mud, have them re-sniff you, and then pet them both in order to have them want to spare you. Moving on from that fight, we tell Papyrus that we ate his spaghetti, then solve a puzzle in the shape of his face. And me being the smooth-brained person that I am, it takes several tries for me to finally get through this puzzle. After the Papyrus face fiasco, we come into another room where the brothers are waiting for us. This time, they have a puzzle that was built by the great Dr. Alphys. This puzzle will be random and has lots of rules to it, but instead of being some crazy hard thing to go through, it makes a solution that is impossible to mess up. Next notable steps of our journey include fighting the greater dog, and spotting Flowey spying on us. Now finally we make it to the town of Snowdin. While in town, we come across the first real shop of the game, sleep in an inn to raise our HP above the maximum, temporarily, talk with some townsfolk, and knock on someone's door. After the enriching activities in town, we decide to move on and walk into a blizzard. But before we can clear the storm, we are stopped by the great Papyrus. This is the second boss fight of the game, and at first his attacks seem really easy, but then he hits us with his blue attack. This is going to be the first instance of soul magic on the player. Basically, it changes the color of the heart and some of the battle mechanics. This is only used during bosses. His blue attack was not meant to do any damage to us, but instead turned us blue. Once we are blue, gravity is applied to our heart and we can no longer stay floating. After this, his attacks become much more difficult, especially for those who are not used to this mechanic. In order to beat him, all you have to do is flirt, and then spare him until he runs out of attacks. Literally. He says that we will have to face a special attack unless we surrender, but when he deploys a special attack, it is eaten by a white dog. This forces him to use a really cool regular attack. And if you survive this attack, the fight will be over. After the fight, we go back into town to take Papyrus up on his date. We ended up getting a tour through his house, and then go into his room for the actual date. I'm not going to say all of the dialogue, because I would like you guys to actually play the game for yourself, but it basically goes that he realizes he doesn't have the strong feelings for us, and says that we should just be friends. After our date with Papyrus, we leave town and go into Immediately upon entering the caves of Waterfall, we expose someone's deepest secret, and then talk to Sans, who apparently has 2 jobs. He says he's going to Grillby's and offers for us to come with him. We of course accept, and he takes us through a shortcut to get there. While in Grillby's, he makes some jokes with the customers, and then sits us down on a whoopee cushion. Clearly, he is very immature. He starts off by talking about his brother, wondering if we think he's cool, and then goes on to talk about how much of a hard worker his brother is, and how he wants to be a Royal Guardsman. Then, the music starts to fade out, and a spotlight is shown on the 2 of us. Sans asks if we know anything about a talking yellow flower. We, the player, of course know who that is. He's talking about Flowey. Apparently, when no one else is around, a yellow flower will appear to Papyrus and whisper things like encouragements and predictions. But Sans appears to not know who Flowey is, because he suspects that somebody is using an echo flower, the blue flowers in Waterfall that repeat the last thing they heard, to play a prank on Papyrus. After this, Sans says that he was going to say something, but he forgot, and then leaves. We, the player, are left with an unsettling feeling after this conversation, because it's the first time we see Sans seem to be serious about something. While it's true he still played some jokes, but once he mentioned the flower, he was serious. No more jokes. This seems out of place for him, because we, the player, have only ever seen him cracking jokes and trying to make us or his brother laugh. And then another thing is unsettling, because we now know that Flowey is indeed up to something behind the scenes, and are left wondering what that could be. After returning from our chat with Sans, we stumble into a room where the lighting changes on our character. We see Papyrus walk in and talk with someone who is clad in armor. As it turns out, this armored individual is none other than Undyne, the leader of the Royal Guard. Papyrus gives his daily report and states that he failed to capture us. Undyne does not seem pleased to hear this, and says that they will capture us themselves. Papyrus tries to say that she does not need to destroy us, but falters at the last second. As we start to walk out of the grass suit we're hiding in, Undyne is alerted by our sounds and looks in our direction, then slowly starts to walk towards us, even summoning a magic spear. Then after a few seconds, she backs off and disappears into the darkness. This scene was very tense, and the first time I played, I was very scared that I would have to fight right then and there. Once we leave the grass, a monster kid comes running out from behind us, very excited that they actually saw Undyne, and they noticed that Undyne was staring right at us. If not for this kid, Undyne probably would have attacked us right then and there without any form of hesitation. A few rooms later, we come into a puzzle that requires you to place 4 lily pads in the same direction to have them bloom and be able to be walked on. Before completing the puzzle, I'm going to go and show you guys a secret room that you can go to. Basically, to get to the secret, you grab the lily pads and send them to the right in that big lake area and have it so that they'll bloom up at the top. What the secret is, once you're in the room, is that you come across a bench and an echo flower. And when you interact with the echo flower, it says that they were not ready for the responsibility. And then when you interact with the bench, you're going to find an item called the Abandoned Quiche, which in the pacifist run will always max out your HP when you eat it. Right after completing the puzzle, we get a call from Papyrus, who apparently called every single number sequentially until he found ours, just to ask us about what we're wearing. A little bit later, we encounter some writing on the walls that share some lore of the world. In the war between humans and monsters, apparently humans attacked first, presumably because they feared the power of a monster that could absorb the human soul. After crossing the river, we encounter Undyne again, but instead of doing nothing this time, she throws a barrage of magic spears at us. Every time one touches us, we go into a mini encounter where we have to avoid lots of spears or take damage. I was so unprepared for this that I even died to one of her barrages. After avoiding her attacks, we run into some grass to take some cover. She follows us in and grabs down, but she only pulls out the monster kid, who she immediately puts back and then walks away. Once again, when we exit the grass, the monster kid runs out and is very excited that they were grabbed by Undyne, even saying that they will never wash their face ever again. Next on our journey, we get pranked by Sans, find some ballet shoes, get called by Papyrus so he can tell us that he told Undyne what we were wearing, thinking that we would change our clothes, and encounter Shiren. After that, we come across a statue that when an umbrella is placed in, it will start playing music. This music is the key to an optional puzzle that grants a very special item. The puzzle that involves said umbrella statue is at this piano. Basically, we have to play the same tune as a statue and a secret door will open up. Once in the door, we see a pedestal with what looks like a Dragon Ball. When we try to take the legendary artifact, we find out that our inventory was somehow filled up by a small white dog.
What the dog doing?
But luckily, that's not the item we were trying to get. You see, the dog leaves a different item in our inventory called dog residue.
A prize tool that can help us later.
Then we once again grab an umbrella and move on. We run into the monster kid in the rainy pathway who decides to follow us because we have an umbrella. They talk about Undyne and how cool they think she is. On our journey with the monster kid, we come into a room and have a moment of silence with a beautiful castle in the background. But then, we come against one of the gamer's oldest enemies, a small, unclimbable slope. The monster kid decides that we should climb on top of their shoulders and onto the cliff top, because we're the protagonist, and they start to leave, saying that they will find a way to catch up to us. Immediately upon leaving the monster kid, Undyne decides to pay us another visit, but this time, instead of simply throwing her spears at us, to mix things up a little bit, she has them appear at our feet. In this area, we must find the exit, all the while spears are spawning around us at a faster and faster rate. I, of course, being the epic gamer that I am, don't make it out fast enough and end up dying. Through epic gaming magic, we only die one time and make it through the next run. But as we run, we realize we're going into a dead end, and when we try to turn back, Undyne blocks our path. She then cuts the bridge that we're standing on, sends us falling down into the cavern. Our screen fades to white, and we hear a strange voice talking to us. Then we wake up on a bed of golden flowers.
Coincidence? I think not!
As we wade our way through garbage, we come across a dummy that looks like the one we talked to in the ruins, and stare into its lifeless eyes for a moment. But, as it turns out, this dummy is not lifeless, and is offended by something we said to the other one in the ruins. His cousin. Also, this guy is no regular enemy, he's the next boss. His unique mechanic is that you have to force his own attacks to hit him. And no, this does not violate the pacifist run. After enough time of hitting himself, Napstablook comes and accidentally forces the dummy away. After that fight, we find a fish house that appears to be empty, hang out with Napstablook, lose our life savings in a snail racing, find the next shop, fight a Tem, and then stumble into Temmie Village, which houses the only store that will actually buy your items. You see, this is where the item Dog Residue will come in handy. This item, when used, will fill up any empty space in your inventory with a copy of itself, and the Tem shop will buy these for money. So I bet you can see where this is going. After getting much money, we get enough to send Tem to college, and then continue our journey. One more thing to mention before we move on. After you send Tem to college, she will then sell a special item called Temmie Armor. This is the best armor in the game because it has a very high defense and will even heal you every other turn. Something cool about this armor is the fact that its price will actually get cheaper the more you die. In my playthrough, I have not died that many times, which is why it's so expensive. And don't worry, this armor is completely optional and not necessary to progress the game. Upon leaving Tem Village, we fight a Washawa and an Aaron, then navigate through a darkening room. Then we enter a corridor where it appears that a spotlight is shining on us, at the end of which there is an echo flower that says, "Behind you." When we turn around, it is none other than Undyne. She says that with 7 human souls, their king, King Asriel Dreemurr, will finally be able to shatter the barrier that traps all the monsters underground. She also states that this is our only chance at redemption, wanting us to give up our soul or she will take it herself. Then, just as it looks like we would have to fight her, monster kids come running out from the grass and says that they will help Undyne fight the bad guy, only to then become confused and ask who she is fighting. Undyne grabs the kid by their ear and drags them off. Soon we again counter the monster kid. They ask us if we are human and tell us that Undyne told them to stay away from us. Then they want us to say something mean so that they can easily hate us. We of course refuse, forcing them to take the initiative. Monster Kid then calls himself a turd and decides to go home, but as they walk away, they trip and fall. But unlike the other times, they almost fall off a cliff this time. Undyne appears at the end of the screen, but we still rush in and save the dangling monster kid. This prompts them to tell Undyne that if they want us, then she will have to go through them. This makes Undyne back off from fighting once more. Then the monster kid says that we should just be friends rather than enemies, and leaves for real this time. In the next area, we see Undyne standing atop a mountain. She says that they have collected 6 human souls thus far, meaning we are the final piece that they need. She begins to tell us the story of her people, but decides against it, saying it would be useless to know when we are dead. She disregards her helmet and her theme starts kicking in. She says that we are standing in the way of everyone's hopes and dreams, and even mocks us for making friends with everyone we have encountered so far. With the save point appearing behind us, it is obvious that we won't be able to avoid fighting her this time. This feeling of course is confirmed when she jumps from the cliff top and the battle begins. Undyne's special mechanic is that she'll turn you green and you cannot move at all. Instead, to avoid damage, you have to move a green shield-looking thing to intercept incoming attacks. Now to beat her and stick to the pacifist run, you have to run from her when she turns you back to normal. When you do this, she will then try to chase you down. You'll have to run a total of about 3 times, And on our last running from Undyne, Papyrus calls us and says that we should all hang out together sometime. Then after running for a few more rooms, Undyne finally collapses from heat exhaustion. With a convenient water cooler nearby, we throw some water on her, and she gets up and looks at us, but then walks away. It's also important to note here that if you do not throw the water on her while she is collapsed, you won't be able to get the true pacifist ending. And with Undyne officially defeated, we move into one of the first things we see while in Hotland is a very large building. We of course decide to go right in without thought of any consequences. When we first enter, the room is dark and we see a giant computer with us on the screen. I guess this explains all the cameras we had come across so far in the journey. As we make it to the end of the room, a door opens and someone walks through. The light comes on and we are spotted by the individual. This individual turns out to be the esteemed Dr. Alphys we had heard Papyrus talk about back in Snowdin. You know, the person that built that totally impossible puzzle. But as it turns out that because she had been watching us this whole time, she actually started to root for us and now wants to help us out. However, there is a catch because apparently, before she wanted to help us, she repurposed the robot into a human killing machine. Surely, we will never encounter such a dangerous device. Then, almost as if on cue, we hear loud metallic noises, and soon enough, Mettaton comes crashing through a wall. He's going to try and kill us by hosting a quiz show, where when we get an answer wrong, he attacks us. But don't worry, all the questions are multiple choice questions, and Dr. Alphys will help you, the player, by shaping your hands into the correct answer. So you can go through this entire sequence without fighting at all. But Mettaton eventually will catch on and ask a question about the show Mew Mew Kissy Cutie, and Alphys can't contain herself and blurts out an answer. After this, Mettaton ends the game show because according to him, Alphys helping us, there is no dramatic tension. After the game show, Alphys gives her her phone number and even upgrades her phone. Now it can text and houses 2-dimensional boxes, so now we don't have to find a box in the world. We can access it whenever we're not in combat. Then after some exploring of the lab, we venture back into the underground. Soon after leaving the lab, we come across an area where we travel using steam vents. Then when we see some lasers, Alphys calls us and gives us an explanation as to what the colors mean. Blue means stop when they pass over you, and red means keep moving. And yet, once again, I show my great gaming skills by almost dying to these lasers, forcing Alphys to shut them off, which leaves us the player wondering why they did not do that to begin with. Perhaps it would just be less fun that way. After this, we solve 2 puzzles that are mini-games where you shoot another ship thing, and then stumble into a dark room. Then lights flash on, revealing another set for a show, but instead of a game show, this time it's a cooking show. We gather all the ingredients Mettaton requests, but it turns out he was missing one, a human soul. And before he can kill us for that delicious soul, Alphys calls and asks if there would be a vegan alternative, to which Mettaton says he had brought such an item, that being soul substitute. And when we go over to the counter to grab the soul substitute, the counter shoots into the sky, and Mettaton gives us only 1 minute to get the from the top. Luckily though, Alphys made our phone into a jetpack for some reason, so we use that to fly up. In this little segment, we have to dodge various ingredients being thrown at us by Mettaton. Well, mechanically it's very similar to other battles in the game. It is a nice breather from the regular battle cycle. When we get to the top, Mettaton reveals that just like any other cooking show, the cake had already been made ahead of time, and then flies off. Soon after the cooking show, we come across Sam selling hot dogs, so naturally, we buy as many as we possibly can, even stacking them on our head. Then, after that, we die to a pyrope, a regular enemy, find an apron, and go through a switch puzzle on a conveyor belt. And then, we come across a puzzle where you have to jump from platform to platform in a specific order in order to open up the end. It, of course, takes my smooth brain a few minutes to get through it. After that, we get stopped by royal guardsmen we saw earlier. At first, they don't realize who we are and try to escort us to safety, but as they escort us, they recognize us as human and then attack. These two are a more difficult fight, especially if you don't know what to do. Basically, you have to make conditions for them to express their love for each other. You do this by removing one's armor and having the other confess a secret. Once you have them confess, they'll go on a date and leave you alone. Once the royal guardsmen are gone, we wander into another dark room. And you guessed it, Mettaton is back with another TV program. Although this time, instead of a cooking show, it's a fake newsreel. He has us choose from 6 objects lying on the ground to do a news story on. You can choose from a basketball, the white dog, a glass of water, or a movie script, a game that looks suspiciously like Undertale, and a present. We choose the game because we're gamers. And as it turns out, all the objects that we could have chose from are actually bombs. And Mettaton says that we have 2 minutes to defuse them all, or a much bigger bomb will go off. Once the timer starts, all the bombs go flying in different directions, and we have to catch and defuse them all. And during this time, Alphys will call you several times to give you advice, and if you follow her advice, it does actually make things a little easier for you. But it is possible to complete the area while completely ignoring her. Once all the bombs are defused, Mettaton will congratulate us by reducing the time from 2 minutes to 2 seconds. But the bomb never explodes because Alphys hacks into it. So he simply curses us and leaves. A short walk later, we get a call from Alphys. She says that we should not worry about meeting King Asgore because he's a really nice guy, and maybe, if we ask nicely, he'll just let us go without fighting. Then we take the elevator to the next level, encounter another spider bake sale, this one much more expensive, and solve another 2 of the ship puzzles. We then stumble into a room that is full of spiders and spider webs. And no, this is not the next spider bake sale, this is actually the next boss. Muffet is her name, and she was hired by someone to kill us. Her unique mechanic is that she constricts your movements so that you can only move on 3 distinct lines. To mix things up for the player, every few attacks she tries to feed you to her pet, and you have to run up the web while avoiding attacks. But we're going to do what's called a pro gamer move and skip this fight. You too can do this by simply buying something from the original spider bake sale in the ruins, and saving that for this fight, and then eating it in front of her. And once you do that, she will be angry at first, but then receive a telegram from the ruins confirming your purchase. And then she lets you go, saying that the person who hired her must have meant a different human. After the fight with Muffet, we come across Mettaton, who sings us a very nice song. And then forces us to do a real version of the puzzle from snowdin, giving us only 30 seconds to complete the puzzle. And while it is possible to actually complete it, I did not actually do that. Either way though, Mettaton will attack you afterwards. And while he's attacking us, Alphys gives us a call to tell us that we have a gun app on our phone, which we use to force Mettaton to run away. After the quote-unquote fight, Alphys calls us again to congratulate us on beating Mettaton. We of course give her some credit and say it was all thanks to her. Then we get in an elevator and head to the next area. That area being MTT Resort, where we first have a chat with Braddy and Caddy, and then agree to have some dinner with Sans. Surely this will go exactly like the other time we had a meal with him, and nothing bad will happen whatsoever. Once we are sat at the table, he says to us that our journey is almost over. He says that here in the underground we have food, drink, and even friends, and Sans questions if what we have to do is really worth it. Clearly, this will be another one of those rare moments that we, the player, actually see Sans being serious. He then starts telling his story, reminding us that he is a sentry in stone forests that is supposed to be on the lookout for humans, and because most of the time he has nothing to do, he decided to practice knock-knock jokes on the door to the ruins. And one day, someone answered him back and even laughed at his joke. And then they told a joke back to him, and it became a regular thing they do, telling bad jokes through the door. And this mystery person is most likely to be Toriel. But then, one day, the woman on the other end made Sans promise to protect any human that came through the door. So basically, what he's saying is what would have happened to us if not for that promise. Hearing Sen say those words is like dropping a bomb directly on the player's head. Everything about that scene freaks the players out. 1. The music goes away, leaving only silence when he speaks, and silence in Undertale is very powerful and unsettling. 2nd, it is a stark contrast to his usual joke-cracking self. This scene is the player's major slap in the face, telling them that there's more to the funny skeleton than just being funny. Then after this, Sans plays it off as nothing but a joke, but we know deep down that it was no joke. And after our little chat with Sans, the only thing of note that I did while at MTT Resort was speak with Burger Pants. Upon leaving MTT Resort, we get a call from Alphys telling us to take the elevator to the end of the core, but when we try to use it, we find that the elevator is out of order. So she tells us to instead go to the right and then continue up. And yet, when we try this path, the room is actually missing and on fire. So we go to the left hallway and get jumped by several monsters. And something the player will probably notice is that the usual battle theme does not play, but rather the area theme instead. This signifies that the end of the game is drawing near. Then we come across a switch that activates a laser grid, and Alphys tries to warn us of their color beforehand, but as it turns out, it's the complete opposite of the order she told us, and now it is starting to look like Alphys does not know what she's doing whatsoever. Soon we come into another laser room, where Alphys fails to turn off the lasers, so she turns off the power to the whole area, but this is temporary. As midway through, the lasers come back on, leading to a timing minigame for the player, where you start walking and stop walking to avoid being hit by lasers. Directly after this room, Alphys calls us again and says that this area looks nothing like her map and that she has to go. In this area, the player gets a choice as to how they can proceed. They can either fight 3 guaranteed enemies or solve a ship puzzle and open the end of the area. I of course choose to do the ship puzzle because I did not feel like fighting at the time. Which of course brings us to the end of the area. Right through this door is the next boss fight. The last boss fight before we enter the castle. Before I do this fight, I decided to go back to Waterfall and take Papyrus up on an offer he said during the Undyne fight. That being to hang out together with her. Back in Waterfall, Undyne's house is pretty easy to find. It's the one that looks like a giant fish. And Papyrus is waiting here to greet us, who tells us to give a bone to Undyne and then knocks on her door. Once inside, Papyrus gives her the gift and then proceeds to jump out the window, saying that he needs to use the restroom. After that, Undyne asks us why we are there, and if it is to humiliate her further, or to gloat our victory to her, which we of course say no to. We instead say that we are here to make friends, but Undyne refuses, saying that we are in the way of everyone's hopes and dreams. And Papyrus saves the situation by sticking his head into the window and saying that he knew that Undyne would not be up to the challenge of becoming our friend. This changes her mind, and she says that she could befriend a wimpy loser like us any day. We then take a seat. Undyne offers us a drink, and we choose to have some tea. She remarks that it is strange that we chose that tea because that's Asgore's favorite tea as well. She then tells a story about how when she was young she tried to fight Asgore, but could not even land a single hit on him. Asgore then took her in and trained her, and one day, Undyne managed to hit him down. And she had never seen someone so happy to have their butts kicked. Now she's the leader of the Royal Guards, and has to train other people like Papyrus to fight. Though she thinks Papyrus is too soft for fighting, so she is trying to teach him to cook so that he has other options in life. At that statement, she remembers that Papyrus was supposed to have his cooking lesson right now, and says that if he is not here to take it, then we will have to take it for him. She starts by having us beat some vegetables, then we add a whole box of noodles to the pot and stir them. Then we turn the heat all the way up, starting a major fire in her house. Seeing her house burning down, she says that she can't force us to like her. But now, she does not really care what happens, and she challenges us to one final fight. But we immediately end it by fake hitting her. She says that even at full force, we could not muster the will to hurt her. But that's okay, because she does not want to hurt us either. She said that we remind her of Asgore, and that he probably does not want to fight us, so if we just talk with him, he should let us go. She also says that we should hang out sometime, but for now, she will go hang with Papyrus, and now every time we call him, she will also be on the phone, and with that out of the way, let's head back to face that boss. Who is in fact Mettaton, who tells us that Alphys has been playing us for a fool the whole time. She had set up various traps and encounters just so that she could sweep in and save us, so that we would think so highly of her that we would have no choice but to stay in the underground. But Mettaton has grown tired of this predictable charade, so he was the one to change the layout of the core and even hired some monsters to attack us, and now in an effort to make the best finale for his show in the underground, he will fight us. It seems that our gun app on our phone actually has no effect on Mettaton. He was only acting earlier. He calls us weak and says that if we continue, Asgore will get our soul and then declare war on humanity. But if he gets our soul, he can stop Asgore's plan. And then we get a call from Alphys herself, and she says that to turn Mettaton around and flip his switch to make him vulnerable. So we tell him that there's a mirror behind him, and then hit that switch.
Oh, yes.
During this fight, you the player will have to shoot various things coming at you. But that is not the most unique thing about this boss fight. You the player also have to manage a rating score for the episode. The longer you take on your turn, the further the score will fall. You can raise the score by being hit by attacks, or doing a cool pose, or eating food from MTT Resort. You can also scoff at the audience, making them give extra ratings to you when you get hit, or brag about your skill and have the rating gradually rise throughout Mettaton's turn, but if you get hit during this, the ratings will instead drop from what they originally were. And once you get to 10,000 rating score, the fight will be over. Mettaton will get some calls from the audience saying how much they like him, and how much they will miss him when he leaves. With all of these comments, Mettaton realizes that he does not need to be an idol to the humans because the underground only needs him. Then, he runs out of batteries for his new body, and Alphys comes in to check on him. And she walks us out to the hallway, but stops us at the elevator to the castle to tell us that she lied to us. In fact, a single human soul is not strong enough to cross the barrier. It actually takes both a human soul and a monster soul. So she tells us that if we want to go home, we must kill and take the soul of Asgore. At this comment, we the player are filled with determination and enter the elevator to the castle. When we exit the elevator, we found ourselves in a grayscale room. After walking across the grayscale bridge, we find a very familiar looking house, one that looks exactly like the one we come across in the ruins. When we enter, we see that the stairs are chained off, so we must go and explore to find the keys to unlock them. As we look for the keys, we get interrupted by various monsters. Although they don't want to fight us, instead they want to tell us a story. And we find a bedroom that has a heart locket and a dagger in a box. We take the locket for ourselves because it's the best armor we can get besides the godly Temi armor, and for obvious reasons we leave the dagger behind. We then unlock the chains and head downstairs. The story that the monsters told us was about the king and queen's children. A human fell into the underground and got injured. When they called out for help, Asriel, the king's son, heard them and brought them into the castle. Over time, the two of them became like siblings, and the king and queen treated the human as if they were own child. This filled the underground with hope, and then one day, the human fell very ill and had only one request, to see the flowers from their home village. But there was nothing the monsters could do, and the next day the human died. And Asriel absorbed their soul, transforming into a being with incredible power, and crossed the barrier and brought the human body back to their home village. In the center of the village, he placed the human body onto a bed of golden flowers. But the other humans mistakenly believed that Asriel had killed the human child. They began to attack him with everything they had. And even with the power to destroy them all, Asriel never fought back against the other humans. While wounded, he stumbled home and died in the castle garden. At this, the kingdom fell into despair, and they felt that the humans once again had taken everything from them. After that, King Asgore had decided that any human that fell into the underground must die. This way, they could eventually collect the 7 human souls necessary to shatter the barrier. Now, this room right here is infamous. Even if you have never played this game, you probably know something that happens in this room, and if you somehow don't know, well, we'll get to that later. About halfway through the room, we come across a very familiar-looking silhouette. He tells us that we will be judged for every action we have taken and every EXP we have gained. EXP apparently being an acronym for execution points. And with enough EXP, our love would have increased, which stands for level with violence. In my journey, though, I never killed anyone, meaning I never had an EXP increase. Sans tells us that we're about to meet the king, and we must make a big decision. Either we let Asgore kill us and humanity gets wiped out by the monsters, or we kill Asgore and leave the underground, but the rest of the monsters remain trapped. I mean, it would be a little unsatisfactory, in my opinion, if we let humanity get wiped out, so I know what I'll have to do. Also take note that Sans is the only one to tell us that we have to fight with Asgore rather than just talking with him. In fact, this whole conversation with Sans gives us a huge insight to him, and yet also makes him a little more mysterious because he seems to be breaking the fourth wall and refers to information that only the player would know. You know, things like your EXP and level. Now with that conversation behind us, we move into yet another grayscale room. While doing some exploration, we come across a room that is filled with coffins, one of which is empty and has our name on it.
Oh, well, that's nice.
After we discover our future coffin, we make our way back to the throne room, which is filled with golden flowers, in the middle of which is Asgore himself. Now at first, Asgore does not realize who we are, but then turns around and sees us, and seems rather surprised, even taking a few steps back. He tells us that he would like to offer us some tea, but we know how it has to be. Asgore tries to kill some of the tension with small talk, but settles on telling us to come to the next room when ready. He tells us to think of it like a trip to the dentist, and says that if we have any unfinished business, now is the time to finish it. We choose to stay, and there's no avoiding this now. With that, 7 containers rise from the ground, 6 of which have visible souls inside of them, and we enter the battle screen. The game literally tells us that our journey is now over, and Asgore he literally destroys your mercy button. He may not want to kill you, but is so determined to set his kind free that he breaks the fourth wall and destroys the mercy button. If you've been playing as a pacifist this whole time, then that breaks your entire combat strategy, so for many players this will be the first time they actually have to do some damage. Sure, you can talk with Asgore, but ultimately this does nothing. You might be able to lower his damage a little bit, but you can also lower his damage by saving and eating the butterscotch pie that Toriel gave you right in front of him. But this does not make him want to spare you or bring back your mercy button. This fight is hard because he has a lot of health and he hits you very hard, not to mention that his attacks is a test to the player of previous game mechanics, not moving when a blue attack and moving through an orange one. But for those of us who do not want to kill him, don't give up hope, because just before you get the final blow, you can piece back together that mercy button, and upon sparing him, he commends you for wanting to stay in the underground and suffer rather than returning to the surface. He promises us that he'll take good care of us in the castle, but something feels off. Not Asgore being nice to the player, because that is fine. Something else. Another threat that we perhaps forgot about. A certain flower that almost killed us in the beginning of the game and has been spying on us the whole time. That's right, it's Flowey. He finishes off the weakened Asgore and then absorbs the 6 human souls that were stored here, and says his iconic line. In this world, it's kill or be killed. And the game crashed. Pretty sweet timing, though. Alright, it's not like we lost much progress, we can just fight Asgore again. Wait, that's not the usual intro at all. And look at this, the game file is now called My World, and the character is Flowey, who looks like he maxed out both the possible level and time played. That's right, That was no game crash, but instead Flowey taking control from the player and reshaping the world. Photoshop Flowey, or Omega Flowey, is the final boss of the neutral ending. And I should probably mention that if the game recognizes that you have never fought him before, it will force you to fight him, even if you have all the conditions for the true pacifist ending. And as a final boss, he is very challenging and has one of the best themes in the game. The whole shtick with this fight is that Flowey has taken over the game from the player, including the ability to save. Essentially, we the player are now an NPC at the mercy of a genocidal player. Flowey has the ability to save the game and load the save file at any time he wants. This mechanic, while hard to fight against, is very cool and completely shatters any form of fourth wall that the game had left after Asgore.
There's still hope. Oh no.
I found you. I finally found you.
Every time you die to Photoshop Flowey, he mocks you, and then the game will close, forcing you to reopen the game. Now you may be thinking, how will I or anyone else be able to defeat him if he can load save files at any point? Well, the answer to that question is not that clear at first, but as you manage to survive his onslaught, eventually you're taken to a screen that looks different, and has a different theme. While dodging the screen full of knives, an act button starts to float around as well, and when you manage to press the act button, it says that you call for help. After a few seconds, all the knives turn into green bandages that heal you. After this, it takes you back to the fight with Flowey. That's right, the way to beat him is to convince the human souls that Flowey has observed to stop helping him and help you instead. You have to go through this combat loop 6 times, one for each soul, and each section will showcase a small part of the dead human's personalities. But don't worry, Flowey gets weaker and will do less damage with every soul you convince to help you. Plus, as a bonus, there's a checkpoint for every time you convince a soul as well. Occasionally during a fight button will appear, and you the player must press it in order to do damage to Flowey. And of course, the more souls that are on your side, the more damage you do. Once we deal the final blow against Flowey, he starts to scream and do the classic villain thing when they are defeated. But before it goes too far, he recalls his save and is back at full health. He mocks us for thinking that we could have defeated him and dares us to call for help one last time. So we do. Once we do that, then the 6 human souls that are still inside of him force their way out, and he loses his godly power. He implodes with lots of color, reverting back into his flower form. We are then prompted with the choice to either kill him or spare him. And with this being the game that it is, I choose to spare him. Flowey says that being nice to him won't fix anything, but I keep sparing him anyway. And he tells us that he will come back and kill everyone that we ever loved, and that the only way to fix this is to kill him. He then begins to question why we're being so nice to him, and says that he can't understand it after everything he had done to us, and then runs away. Which brings us to the credits. You know, the end of the game. After which, we get a call from Sans, saying that after we left, the Queen returned to rule the Underground. She instated a new policy on humans. Now, they will be treated as friends and not enemies. Apparently, the 6 human souls that Asgore had collected vanished without a trace. We also hear from Papyrus and Undyne. The Royal Guard was disbanded, leaving Papyrus as both the captain and the only remaining member. And Undyne is now helping Alphys with her research. Undyne also apologizes for what happened with Asgore, saying that it was not our fault and we did what we had to do. After said phone call, Flowey appears to us one last time, saying that we will most likely never get to see our friends again, and reminds us how much we set them back by releasing those human souls. He then asks us if we would be interested in getting a better ending. He tells us to load our save file and go talk with Dr. Alphys. then leaves while saying see you soon. When we enter Alphys's lab after following her from the dump, we see a note on the ground. It says that she would like to thank us for the help we gave her back there, but that won't make her problems go away. She has to face this problem on her own, and if she never comes back, then we deserve to know the truth about what she did, prompting us to enter the door in front of us. But instead of finding a bathroom, it turns out that the room is an elevator, so we hit the button to go downstairs. But when we do, an alarm starts playing and the power goes out. Then we hear the sound of the elevator falling and crashing at the bottom floor. After a few seconds, the door opens up, bringing us to... In the true laboratory, the tone of the game suddenly makes a dramatic shift into horror. The color scheme is a little more dulled down, and you have to walk through the area and try to find a way to restore power. And on the way, the player has the option to read various lab entries on the displays in the hallway. Soon we come into a room with a door that has 4 key slots. It's labeled as a power room. And as we turn on some things looking for keys into the power room, something drips out and forms a monster. This encounter is very weird because the monsters are glitching out and they don't even have a name. But you can beat them by using your cell phone and then joining 2 of them. This will grant you the red key, 1 out of the 4 keys that we need. In the room next to the sink, there's a socket on the wall that we insert the red key into. Then we make our way back to the locked power room and begin exploring in the other direction. Then we come into a large room full of beds and decide that right now is the best time to take a nap. Ah, look, that guy was even nice to tuck us in. How nice. After walking through some corridors, we find a bathroom with someone taking a very noisy shower. Don't they know it's rude to be this loud? Huh. No one's in there.
Must be my imagination.
Either way, we got the green key from the tub, so only 2 more keys to go. Oh look, is that a save point in front of a very weird machine? Yeah, it's kind of a strange placement. Oh, it was just an enemy in disguise. Of course. Lemon Bread is their name, and killing me with this attack is their game. But don't worry, I refight them and win this time. Afterwards, I go back into the bedroom and grab a key from underneath one of the beds. Then I get lost in a fog room for a minute and go to the other side of the area to turn off the vent system. But when we do, another amalgamate forms from the air. This one, at least, is dog-themed and is tamed from playing fetch for a few times, not to mention that it's cute in its own creepy sort of way. With Undyne defeated, we head back to the room that was filled with fog, and find it full of refrigerators, the last of which, when we interact with, becomes an amalgamate of its own. This one, well, not a challenge in the fight itself, it's just plain creepy. But hey, they dropped the blue key for us. So now that is over with, so we insert the key in the room before us, and jimmy our way back to the way we came to explore in another direction. As we were walking down our hallway with mirrors and flowers, we trigger an encounter. The symbol actually transforms into the amalgamate. Anyway, we promptly defeat them, slap that last key into place, and run all the way back to the power room. But when we turn the power back on, all the amalgamates slowly come up to us while we were cornered. Thankfully, at the last second, Alphys comes in and calls them off, saying she has food for them. Apparently, they get sassy when they're not fed. Okay then. Alphys says that she was trying to bring the power back on, but we were apparently one step ahead of her. She says that in the note she left at the beginning of this place, she says she wasn't worried about the work guys down here, but she was actually afraid of not being able to tell the truth, and might have done something cowardly. But what exactly is the truth, you might be currently screaming into your screen? Well, worry not, dear Virio. Do you remember the lab terminals I mentioned earlier? Well, throughout their entries, they tell a story. In the first few entries, it is revealed that Alphys was commissioned by Asgore to find a way to break the barrier that traps the monsters underground. This could only be done with soul power, something that can't be remade artificially, so that would limit Alphys to the use of monster souls. But it would take a lot of power to extract a soul from a living monster, killing them in the process. And unlike human souls, a monster soul shatters immediately upon death. Alphys then decided to name the power that lets human souls persist after death to be determination. Now the saying, "you are filled with determination," whenever the player saves, has another context. Instead of some game mechanic, there is a good reason with lore as to why the player's character can save at any point. In the next entries, it states that Asgore asked the underground for any monsters that had died. He gave their bodies to Alphys, and before the bodies turned into dust, she injected the determination into them, hoping to be able to extract the souls as the bodies drifted away. But in doing this, the bodies never turned to dust, and people began to ask questions as to what was going on, as they were expecting the dust back for their funerals. Alphys was confused as to why nothing was happening, and kept injecting the bodies with determination. Then eventually one of the bodies opened its eyes, and all the monsters that had died gotten back up and started to walk and talk as if nothing had happened to them. She called this research a dead end, but it was nice to have a happy ending. She then sent the souls back to Asgore and put the vessel back into the garden. The next entry only says no a bunch of times, so I assume that everything went okay. Monsters then began asking questions about their relatives' remains, and it got so bad that Alphys does not even answer her phone anymore. She had to select a suitable vessel to wield the monster's souls, because a monster cannot absorb a fellow monster's soul. As we leave the power room, there are some terminals that did not have power before that have been reactivated, and instead of the usual green screen, these ones have a red screen with a smile. The vessel that Alphys had chosen was the first golden flower to appear in Asgore's garden, the one from the outside world. She wonders what will happen when something with no soul gains the will to live. The only other entry in this style says that the flower had gone missing. I wonder who that could be. I don't know. When we make it back to the elevator, we get a call from someone who we don't know. They say that it's been a long time and they thank us for allowing everything to fall into place. The mysterious stranger then ends the call by saying that they will see us soon, and with that, an alarm begins to blare in the elevator and the screen goes white. When we can see again, we can see an elevator that has been covered with some green vines. It also appears that we're back in the castle somehow, so we make our way through the empty judgment hall and the throne room back to where Asgore has been waiting for us. And we once again challenge him to a fight, but before he can, Toriel saves us from Asgore the same way that she saved us from Flowey back in the very beginning of the game. She says that she thought she would just let us go on our journey all alone, but could not stop worrying about us and the decisions that would be forced upon us. And she says that she simply could not allow someone to be sacrificed for someone else to leave the underground, and that as terrible as Asgore is, he too deserves mercy. And Toriel then calls Asgore pathetic, and says that if he really wanted to free their kind, he could have crossed the barrier when he obtained the first human soul, collected 6 others, and returned to destroy the barrier. And Asgore, of course, agrees he's pathetic, and asks Toriel if they could still be friends. She, rightfully so, says no. Then suddenly Undyne pops up and tries to stop a fight that of course is not happening. And when she realizes what actually is happening, she goes and tries to comfort Asgore.
That's rough, buddy.
Soon, Alphys, Papyrus, and even Sans all come to stop the fight between Asgore and the player. And Toriel is very pleased to see that we have made so many friends along our journey. She also recognizes Sam's voice as a person who would always tell knock-knock jokes through the door to the ruins. And after a short while, Alphys asks Papyrus how he knew to call everyone to the castle if she got there before him, to which he replies that a small flower told him what to do. And at this point, a giant vine shoots across the screen, ensnaring all of our friends right where they stood. It looks as if Flowey managed to steal all the human souls while everyone was distracted trying to save us. Even worse is that now he has access to the souls of our friends as well, and Flowey mocks us for wanting a better ending. He's doing this because it is all a game. Literally. And if we leave the underground, then we win the game. And if we win the game, then we won't want to come back. And what would Flowey do without us to play with? He says that he will always hold victory right in front of us only to snatch it away over and over and over again. But he does state that if we somehow manage to defeat him, he will give us our happy ending, releasing our friends and destroying the barrier, also stating that he will keep us here forever. At the end of his speech, he traps the player and begins to bombard them with attacks, and before he can get the killing blow, however, our friends start to use their power to block his attacks. Each one of our friends gives us some words of support and believes that we can beat Flowey somehow. Even the random monsters from throughout the underground begin to show up to show their support, but this is all according to Flowey's plan, because now he absorbs all the souls in the underground and reveals his true form. This is it, the final boss, the climactic finish. It's the end, and all we can do is rely on our hopes and dreams. Throughout the fight, if you hope, you'll take less damage during Asriel's next attack, and if you dream, your inventory will fill up with healing items. In the beginning of the fight, the player simply has to survive long enough to exhaust Asriel's dialogue. And Asriel says that he no longer cares about destroying the world. Instead, he wishes to defeat us and gain total control over the timeline. And Asriel knows that we would do it again and says that we would lose to him again and again and again because we want the happy ending. And we love our friends. Finally, he unleashes a devastating attack, and of course we survive. But seeing this, Asriel reveals that he's been holding back this whole time and changes his form once again. And eventually, in the snow form, he does manage to kill us, but instead of our soul shattering like it normally does, it simply refused. And we went back into the fight. Then we try to struggle, but we can't move, and we try to reach our save point to no avail, but with what little power we have, we try to save something else. So we reach into Asriel's soul and one by one bring the memories of our friends back, saving their souls in the process. After we save all of our friends, we realize that there is one more person who needs to be saved. Now, who could this mystery person be? Oh, come on. In an ending where you befriend every person who you come across, that last person that needs saving is none other than Asriel himself. This shows a cutscene that appears to be a memory from Asriel with a human. It freaks him out and makes him threaten us. But then he asks why he keeps fighting to keep us around. He says that we are special and that we're the only ones that are fun to play with anymore. He says he cares about us more than anyone else and is not ready to say goodbye to someone like us again. He states that he is alone and afraid, and then reverts back into the child we briefly saw at the beginning of the fight and begins apologizing. Then Asriel states something that is potentially a little shocking to the player. We are not actually the person that we named in the beginning of the game, and that apparently they have been gone a very long time. He then asks us our real name, which is evidently Frisk, and he explains that he has not felt like this for a long time, because as a flower he lacked the ability to feel love for other people. But now he's not only feeling his own compassion, but also the emotions of all the monsters in the underground, and says that even though they barely know us, they all really love us anyway. And Asriel understands that he's done some horrible things and hurt a lot of people, and decides to return everyone and all of their souls, but before that he would destroy the barrier once and for all. And without the souls in his body, he said that he will soon revert back into a flower and won't be himself anymore. He tells us that it would probably be for the best if we forgot about him and moved on with our life. And we, of course, take this moment to comfort him, and the screen fades to white, and we wake up surrounded by our friends who have no memory of what happened to them or us, but do notice the barrier is gone. At this point, the player can go back to any part in the underground, and for those of you who have not played the game and are still watching this video, thank you by the way, I implore you to go play the game yourself and go all the way back to the first room in the ruins, because they are open once again. I won't spoil what's waiting there for you, but trust me, it's worth it. And when we exit the underground, we are greeted by a nice view of a sunrise. Everyone stops to take it all in, and Asgore states that this is the dawn of a new era between humans and monsters, and offers for us to be the monster's ambassador. Obviously, we accept. Then Papyrus rushes off to make a great first impression on the humans, and both Sans and Undyne follow Papyrus to make sure he doesn't get into any trouble. Alphys follows Undyne, and Asgore leaves shortly after. Then we choose to live with Toriel, and she finds this ironic because had we said this earlier in the game, none of this would have ever happened. And with that, she grabs our hand, and we walk off together, and the credits begin to roll. Right, so that was a really feel-good ending with all the characters that we'd come to love throughout the game. And clearly, that was all the content the game had to offer. Wait, something's wrong. Why isn't the video ending? Wait, no, don't undo all the good we've done. Stop. Whether through sheer curiosity, a desire for more content, or the want for a challenge, most players will reset the game at this point, restarting their journey. And a lot of them, myself included, will commit a grave sin, that being Alright, so before we begin, I'll just say right now that for time's sake, I'm going to skip a lot of the Genocide route. You aren't missing that much anyway, and I bet there's really only one thing in particular that you would like to see if you're still watching this part of the video. Don't worry, we'll get to him soon enough. Oh, and I named the human Kara in this route simply for the extra dialogue the game gives you. So the ruins play almost exactly the same as the Papyrus route, but this time, we take our time killing absolutely everything until we get this screen. The "but nobody came" screen means that we have killed every single monster in the area except for the boss, who in this case is Toriel. And through the magic of video editing, you, the viewer, will not have to look at the screen more than once, but I, the player, once I clear out an area, will be looking at this every few seconds. I find that it popping in all the time when there are no monsters left in the area, combined with the fact that the soundtrack is replaced with a more menacing theme, is the game punishing the player for the path that they are walking.
Alright, I get it!
Anyway, onto the tutorial fight. That's right, she fell in one hit. And in her final moments, she realized that she was not protecting us by not letting us leave, but instead protecting everyone else. Oh, and you better get used to the bosses dying in one hit, because all but one of them dies in one hit. I know it's not very satisfactory, but we are the player going out of our way to kill every living creature in the underground, and with Toriel dead, we must now live with our choices and press onward. Upon exiting the ruins, Flowey talks with us, stating that we are empty inside just like him, and that we are still inseparable after all these years. He mentions he has a plan to become all-powerful, and he wants us to help him kill everyone in the world. So the next time we meet Sans marks the area that is most different from the pacifist run. After his whoopee cushion prank, he remarks that we did not emote whatsoever. Then when Sans tells us to go behind the conveniently shaped lamp, the human does not move at all, and Papyrus comes to see if Sans got a human and leaves right away when Sans tells him that yes, he in fact did catch a human. Before we leave the area, Sans stops us and says that his brother was really looking forward to seeing a human and that it would be a huge help if we kept pretending to be one for him. Then, we come into the invisible maze puzzle. Papyrus does not even get to begin explaining it before the human simply walks straight across, making Papyrus try to get us to go back by saying that puzzles are a long tradition in the underground, but the human does not listen, forcing Papyrus to leave the area. These two interactions pretty well sum up the rest of the snowy forest area. The human refuses to participate in any puzzles or anything set out for them by Papyrus, all the while Sans is becoming more passive-aggressive with us. And when we come into Snowdin and find it that it's completely devoid of life, the shop is empty, so we take some things to help us on our journey, and find only one person is left in town, the Monster Kid, who says that all the adults went and hid somewhere, saying that they are stupid and they have Undyne to protect them. If only Monster Kid knew who was in front of them. And I feel like this is a good time to mention that if you did Genocide as your first time playing the game, then you would miss out on so much personality from the game. You would not be able to interact with random NPCs, and because you try to kill all the enemies, you don't see their personality either. Couple this with the fact that you one-shot all the bosses, and you wonder, why would anyone want to play this route? But it is time to deal with Papyrus, and he calls us a weirdo because we do not like puzzles and are always covered in dust. However, he sees great potential with us, and says that everyone is capable of great things, and follows up by saying that someone needs to keep us on the straight and narrow, saying that he would gladly be our friend. Then, when we enter the battle screen, it shows that he is already sparing us, and with his final words, he says that we could do better, even if we do not think so. Once again, Waterfall plays out almost exactly like the pacifist run, except this time all the puzzles are already solved for us. Then we come across Monster Kid, who confronts us about all the terrible things that we had done, even going so far as to say that we would have to go through them in order to hurt anyone else. Who does this kid think they are? They're nothing but free EXP. Yet when we attack them, Undyne jumps in and saves them, taking the blow to herself. She tells them that they should have listened to her, and that she'll handle us. In her final words, she states how she failed all of her friends as she turns into dust. But at the last second, Undyne reassembles herself and says that there's a burning feeling deep inside of her that won't let her die, and she realizes that if we make it past her, it won't just be the monsters that we kill, but also all of humanity as well. She can feel everyone in the world's hearts beating as one, to defeat us, and she declares that she will strike us down and the screen goes white. And when it returns to normal, Undyne has taken a new form. Remember when I said that there was only one boss in the game that does not die in one hit? Well, this is her. Not even Sans can withstand more than one hit from the player, a true testament to how tough Undyne is. This fight is like a brick wall hitting the player right in the face. She does insane damage and there is little time to react to her attacks. This is where most players realize that they are completely underprepared for this fight and die repeatedly. Undyne's fight serves more than just a challenge to the player, however. It also severs any sense of connection they have with the characters they are trying to kill. This fight turns the player into the heartless sociopath that they have set out to be. It accomplishes this by making the player die over and over again, and they soon become frustrated, and when they finally beat her, they no longer feel guilt for their actions, but instead they are satisfied because they overcame the big challenge to them. The Undyne, the Undying is a fight the player will not soon forget, not to mention she has a killer theme. She also shows firsthand what a living monster could do with the power of determination, even if it eventually melts her in the end. And in her final moments, she says that Alphys told was told to evacuate the rest of the underground to an undisclosed location in the event that Undyne were to die. And when we compare Undyne with the next boss, Muffet, she's not really worth talking about. It's just back to the one-hit kill and move on. Well, at least when we come into MTT Resort, we find that Burger Pants is still working, and that our threats mean nothing to him because he can't go to hell as his all-out of vacation days. It's a good thing that his shop is still in business because we're going to need some items from there for the upcoming fight. Mettaton at least tries to be something cool by taking his human hunting form, but like the others, he simply dies in one hit. And as we make our way through Asgore's house, Flowey talks with us. He asks us if we remember playing there and that today would be just as fun. Flowey remembers when he first woke up in the garden. He was scared and called out for help, but nobody came. Asgore eventually found Flowey crying in the garden, and he explained what had happened to him. Asgore took him in, saying that it was going to be alright, but Flowey felt nothing whatsoever, and he spent weeks with the king trying to feel something. But it became too much, and he ran away to the ruins where he found Toriel, but she too failed to make him feel anything. He wanted to feel love again, and decided it was not worth living in a world without love, and tried to commit suicide. But as he was dying, he had second thoughts and found himself awake, back in the garden. At first, Flowey used his new power for good by helping people and becoming their friends. He found their companionship amusing, but eventually found everyone to be predictable. Eventually, he started to kill out of curiosity, and finds it liberating. He says that he has seen everything that the world has to offer. He's read every book and burned every book.
And so on and so forth.
But he could never seem to predict us. When Flowey first saw us in the ruins, he did not recognize us and tried to take our soul, but could not reach his save file because our determination is greater than his own. He's grown tired of everything and just wants to get rid of it all. And seeing us changes his mind though. He thinks now that living on the surface with us would not be that bad. And Flowey thinks that we are the only ones who could truly understand him and won't give him any pity. Then he says that we would not hesitate to kill each other if we got in each other's way. This makes him afraid of us and of dying, so he tries to tell us to go back and that the world is just fine the way it is, and then he simply vanishes, and we enter the Judgment Hall. Alright, this is it for real. I don't even have to say what's about to transpire in this room. I can all but guarantee that even if you've never played or heard of Undertale before watching this video, that you have heard echoes of the character Sans. His challenge is a legendary and took the internet by storm. And when we talk to Sans himself before the fight, he drops his usual joke-telling self and is completely serious, stating that he's been a little busy. And he poses a hypothetical question asking if even the worst of people can change for the better. And with us not responding, he poses another question, asking if we want to have a bad time, because that's exactly what we'll get if we take another step forward. He's by far the most challenging boss in the game, and if Undyne was a brick wall to the face, then Sans is more comparable to a meteorite striking directly down upon you. And where Undyne was meant to sever the player's feelings towards the character of the game, Sans is meant to break your spirit entirely. He's supposed to eat you up and spit you out. His attacks require memorization and a level of precision that is not seen anywhere else in the game. He also has a unique mechanic to his fight. You see, in every other fight of the game, if you get hit, there's a few seconds of invincibility, but you don't really get that with Sans, meaning that if you get trapped by one of his moves, then you will die in a few seconds. Then on top of that, he kind of has a poison, meaning that after you get hit, even if you're only hit once, your health will continue to go down for a few seconds after being hit. At least the poison can't bring you down below 1 HP, not that that's much of an upside. He is so difficult because he's not fighting to stop the human from leaving the underground or to avenge the monsters that you've killed up to this point. He's fighting to stop the player entirely. Like I said, he's meant to break your spirits, because if he can do just that, then the player will close the game and not come back, putting an end to all the constant resetting and the different timelines. Sans is the only boss that can actually dodge your attacks. Now for the player to advance in the fight, you have to try and hit him and keep attacking, which means anytime you stop the heal, you're not progressing your fight whatsoever. So you kind of spend more time in hell, so to speak. After every time you try and hit Sans, he will say something to you, giving you insight to his character and motivations. You see, after you Your second time attacking him, he states that he saw reports of a massive anomaly in the space-time continuum, timelines jumping left and right, starting and stopping, saying all of that must have been us. And he says we can't understand how it feels knowing that at any moment it could all be reset and he would have no memory of this timeline whatsoever. And as you progress his dialogue, he starts using different, more challenging attacks. Something that surely will be a surprise to the player is that after about 13 attacks towards Sans, he tries to spare you. But this is only a lie, because if you try to spare him back, he will kill you with an undodgeable attack. And saying that if you were ever friends with him in the other timelines, do not come back. And if you, the player, have the determination to keep challenging Sans in this fight to the death, then sparing you is simply a free few turns to heal yourself back up to full HP. And if you thought Sans was hard before this, then get ready for him to turn things up to 11 once you attack again. After this point, for most of his attacks, you will be teleported to another attack mid-attack, which keeps you on your toes the whole time. And on top of that, whenever it is your turn, there are now attacks going over your menu buttons, which means that you have to have good timing on the menu or else you'll take extra damage during your turn. He says it might sound crazy, but he did genuinely want to be our friend. He thought that the anomaly was just jumping timelines because they were unhappy, and that they would stop when they got what they wanted. Maybe all they needed was some good food, bad laughs, and nice friends. But we won't ever be happy, will we? He says that we would just keep consuming timelines until, well, we just need to learn when to quit. And before I show you the end of this fight, please enjoy a little compilation of me dying to Sans over and over again. As you approach the end of the fight, he starts to warn you about his special attack, and once you survive the attack before his special attack, then worry not, because you have just beaten Sans. Congratulations. His special attack is simply not doing anything, locking you into his turn for all of eternity. But if you stay still for a certain amount of time, Sans will fall asleep, and then you can push your box thing over to your attack button, finally killing Sans. And in his final moments, he says he's going to Groovy, and off-screen asks Papyrus if he wants anything before finally dying. Now, what do you get for beating the hardest boss in the game, you might ask? Well, you get an ending that will permanently affect any other run you do in this game. Basically, your actions reawaken something within you. They want to erase this pointless world so we can move on to the next one. And if you try to say no, they'll ask you since when were you in control, jump scare you, and then delete the world anyway. So now that we've walked through the story, I'll just say my final thoughts about the game really quick. This game shines its brightest with its characters that are very unique and full of personality. It is filled to the brim with little details in every corner, and with its take on the build-your-own-adventure story combined with its golden sense of humor, I think it is very clear why so many people love this game. If I had to find something I would say that I don't really like about this game, it would be the general gameplay while you're walking around. And let me be the first to say that is really just a nitpick, so it's not that big of a deal. Not to mention, this issue gets resolved in the next game, Deltarune. And one thing I haven't really mentioned yet is the soundtrack, which is absolutely phenomenal. Like, I don't think there's a single song that I don't like. I also don't really know if I can truly point to one song and say, yes, that right there, that's my favorite. But here's a representation of some of my favorites. All in all, I'd give this game the following scores. Alright, I would like to take a second to thank you guys for watching this video. I put a lot of time into this, and I hope that it came out alright. And I hope you enjoy your day or night, or whatever time it is. Goodbye.